Have you ever just stopped and wondered why you have a sense of right and wrong? I mean, really wondered. Is it just a gut feeling, some rule that society taught you, or does it point to something way, way bigger? Well, today we're going to dive into what's known as the moral argument, this idea that our inner compass might just be a clue to the nature of the universe itself. So let's just start with a gut check. I want you to really think about this question. It's a horrible thought, I know, but it's so powerful because the answer feels completely universal, doesn't it? It's not a matter of opinion, it's not a cultural preference, it just feels objectively, deeply, and fundamentally wrong. And that feeling right there, that powerful gut-level sense that we ought to behave in certain ways and not in others, that's the very thing we're going to unpack today. You can think of it as our internal moral compass, and as we're about to see, it's the launchpad for a really profound argument about reality itself. Okay, so first up, let's explore this idea a little more. Does this compass that we all seem to have actually point to some kind of universal objective truth? And if it does, where in the world does that truth even come from? Before we go any further, we need to get a key term down: objective morality. Now, this isn't about your personal preference or what's popular at the moment. It's the idea that some things, like kindness, are genuinely good, and other things, like cruelty, are genuinely bad, and that this is true no matter what any person or culture thinks about it. Proponents say these are moral facts, as real as something like the law of gravity. You know, the writer C.S. Lewis had a really interesting take on this. He argued that the very fact we argue about what's right and wrong proves we believe in a real standard. Think about it. We don't argue about which flavor of ice cream is the right one, but we absolutely argue about justice and fairness. And when we do, we're appealing to some kind of higher moral law. And that, he said, leads to the big question: where did that law come from? And that line of thinking builds directly into a formal argument, because if a moral law actually exists, then logically it stands to reason that there must be a moral lawgiver. This is the absolute core of the classical moral argument for the existence of God. So here's how the argument basically breaks down, step by step. First, it starts with something we all experience, the sense of objective moral values. Second, it says these values need a real foundation. They can't just be something we all made up. And third, it concludes that the best, most logical explanation for a universal moral law like that is a transcendent moral lawgiver. But of course, it's not that simple, right? This argument faces some really powerful and common challenges, especially from an atheist or secular viewpoint. These critiques really try to poke holes in the very foundation of the argument, this idea that morality is objective in the first place. Okay, so the first big challenge is what's called moral relativism. This is the view that what we call morality is really just a product of our time and place. I mean, think about it. A few hundred years ago, slavery was considered normal in many powerful societies. Today, we view it as a self-evident evil. So if morality is this fixed, universal truth, critics ask, why does it seem to change so much? All right, now for the second challenge. This one is a classic philosophical brain twister that goes all the way back to Plato. Just take a second and really think about this question. It seems pretty simple on the surface, but either way you answer it, you run into a huge problem for the idea that God is the source of morality. So this puzzle breaks down into two tricky options, what philosophers call the horns of the dilemma. On the one hand, if something is good just because God says so, then morality seems totally arbitrary. He could have commanded us to be cruel, and that would have to be good. On the other hand, if God commands things because they are already good, then that means goodness is a standard that exists outside and above God, which would make him kind of unnecessary for morality, wouldn't it? The third major challenge comes straight from science, and this perspective argues that morality isn't divine at all. It's actually a biological adaptation. The idea is that for social species like us, traits like empathy and cooperation were crucial for survival. Groups that work together were more likely to live and pass on their genes. So in this view, our moral sense is just a successful survival strategy that got hardwired into our brains over millions of years. No lawgiver needed. So, we've got the argument for a lawgiver on one side and three powerful critiques against it on the other. Now, let's shift gears and explore how a theological framework, specifically one from the Quran, seeks to answer these very challenges and give us a totally comprehensive picture of morality. From this perspective, morality is anything but relative. A verse like this presents principles like justice and goodness, not as cultural suggestions, but as direct, universal commands from God. they're positioned as objective truths that act as a constant standard for all of humanity, no matter where or when you live. And this brings us to a really central concept called Fitrah. You can think of this as the idea that every single human being is born with an innate programming and natural pull towards truth and goodness. So from this viewpoint, our moral intuitions aren't some random accident of evolution. They are an intentional feature of our original design, a spiritual compass placed within us by our Creator. This table does a great job of laying out how this framework tries to resolve all the critiques we've just talked about. To counter moral relativism, it points to universal standards like justice. For evolutionary ethics, it reframes our moral sense as an intentional design, the Fitrah. And it offers a really unique way out of that tricky Euthyphro dilemma, which we should look at a bit closer. So the Quranic response basically says that the Euthyphro dilemma is a false choice. The idea isn't that morality is some separate thing that God either invents or has to follow. Instead, the idea is that God's very nature is the standard of goodness. He is the good. So his commands aren't arbitrary at all. They're just an expression of his own perfect, unchanging character. The source of morality and the standard of morality are one and the same. Okay, so after going through the argument, the tough critiques, and this theological response, what's the ultimate takeaway? What does this perspective mean for how we understand ourselves and our place in the world? Well, first, it's proposing a radically different alternative to those other explanations. It suggests that our deepest, most profound sense of right and wrong is more than just a useful habit our society agreed on, and it's way more than just a genetic echo from our evolutionary past. Ultimately, in this view, morality is a fundamental part of what we are. It's woven right into the fabric of our consciousness. It's like the operating system for the human spirit, designed to recognize and align with the very nature of our Creator. It's not just a rulebook, it's our purpose. And so that leaves us with a final, really powerful question to think about. If this moral compass of ours isn't an accident, but a core feature of our design, a tool given to us for a purpose, then what are we supposed to do with it? What are we, as individuals and as societies, actually building with this divine blueprint? It's a question worth reflecting on. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.